Empires do not die in silence. They fall with parades, then funerals. In the span of just 1 month in early 1979, a 2500-year-old monarchy collapsed without a single foreign army setting foot in the country. The Peacock Throne, once the symbol of Persian pride and imperial continuity, was abandoned. The Shah of Iran, hailed as the modernizer of the Middle East, a friend of the West, a secular autocrat groomed in European luxury, was gone, and in his place stood a cloaked figure in black, a cleric who had spent 14 years in quiet exile, teaching scripture, waiting, and planning. Ayatollah Khomeini, elderly man, with no army, no party, and no government, returned to Iran on a chartered Air France flight, and within weeks became the most powerful figure in the country. His face filled the skies. His voice filled the streets. His ideas would soon reshape not just Iran, but the entire Middle East. How did it come to this? How did the Shah, backed by oil, Western weapons, and one of the largest secret police forces in the world, fall so fast? And how did a reclusive cleric channel decades of resentment, humiliation, and chaos into a revolution that would dethrone kings, divide nations, and spark a global confrontation? Still burning today, this is the story of a man raised in the palaces of Tehran and the man raised in the shadows of Qom. It is the story of two worldviews, colliding: modernism against tradition, monarchy against martyrdom, and it begins not in 1979, but in 1941, on the day a young prince inherited an empire, but not the strength to hold it. The year is 1941. The world is at war. Hitler has invaded the Soviet Union. The Allies are desperate for a southern corridor to funnel weapons and oil to their eastern front. That corridor runs straight through Iran. Iran's ruler at the time, Reza Shah Pahlavi, has dreams of modernizing Persia into a secular powerhouse, but he also harbors sympathy for the Axis powers. Britain and the Soviet Union issue an ultimatum. Reza Shah refuses, so they invade. The Allied forces force Reza Shah to abdicate, but instead of abolishing the monarchy, they install his 21-year-old son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, as the new Shah. At just 21 years old, the young monarch is timid, educated in Switzerland, and lacking his father's iron resolve, but he carries a burden heavier than most can imagine leading: a divided nation under occupation, inheriting both the throne and his father's enemies. Among those enemies is a young cleric named Ayatollah Khomeini, born in 1902 in the religious city of Khomeini. Khomeini never knew his father, who was murdered under suspicious circumstances when he was just 5 months old. Khomeini would later blame Reza Shah for the killing. Whether rightly or wrongly, he never forgot. As the Shah begins his reign under the watchful eyes of the Allies, Khomeini is studying Islamic law in Qom, while the Shah tours Europe, dreaming of turning Tehran into a second Paris. Khomeini is teaching the Quran to young seminarians, warning them of the creeping dangers of Western decadence and the loss of Islamic identity. The seeds of confrontation are being planted, slowly, quietly, and both men are unaware that their paths are already on a collision course. In the post-war years, Iran becomes a hotbed of political tension. The Shah, ever more influenced by Western ideals, dreams of transforming Iran into a modern industrialized nation. He courts American presidents. He studies Hoover Dam technology. He walks through Pentagon war rooms in Washington. Meanwhile, the West has its eyes on Iranian oil. The Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, Essentially, a British-controlled empire within Iran controls vast resources, but in 1951, Iran's parliament, led by the populist Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, votes to nationalize the oil industry. Britain responds with an embargo. The economy crashes, and in 1953, the CIA and MI6 stage a coup. Mossadegh is overthrown. The Shah, who had briefly fled, returns in triumph. But this time, he returns stronger and more authoritarian. With the help of American advisors, he creates SAVAK, a secret police force tasked with rooting out dissent, leftist ideology, and any threat to the throne. Meanwhile, clerics like Khomeini watch and wait, but they are not idle. Radical religious groups like Islam begin assassinating secular intellectuals and even a prime minister. Khomeini, as a senior cleric, issues religious cover for their actions. By 1963, the Shah launches his most ambitious plan yet, the White Revolution. It is a sweeping series of reforms: land redistribution, literacy campaigns, women's suffrage, and industrial development. The Shah believes he is lifting Iran into the modern age. But to Khomeini and the clerics, the White Revolution is an assault on Islam. When the Shah extends voting rights to women, Khomeini explodes. He writes furious letters to the monarch. He denounces the regime from the pulpit. He accuses the Shah of being a puppet of America, a traitor to Islam. The Shah has him arrested. Demonstrations erupt in calm. The military opens fire. Blood is spilled on holy ground. Khomeini is sentenced to death, then exiled to Najaf, Iraq. The battle has begun, but it is far from over. The Shah believes he has neutralized the threat. Khomeini is gone. The cities are quiet, and his reforms continue. But appearances deceive. In exile, Khomeini retreats not into silence, but into deeper thought. In Najaf, one of Shiite Islam's holiest cities, he begins to formulate the political theology that will one day become the foundation of an Islamic republic. He lectures quietly to a small group of students. He dictates a new doctrine of government, Velayat a Faqih, the guardianship of the Islamic jurist. It is radical. It is revolutionary. And it is unlike anything Shiism has embraced in 1,000 years. In this model, the clergy would no longer merely guide souls, they would rule a nation. Most scholars dismiss the idea as medieval fantasy. But the streets of Iran are changing. The Shah's modernization is both swift and uneven. Millions leave the countryside and pour into cities, chasing dreams of prosperity, only to find urban slums, unemployment, and broken promises. Traditional communities are uprooted. Local leaders, especially the bazaars, the merchants of Iran's markets, feel betrayed. These were the same merchants who had once supported the monarchy. Now, they're being sidelined by Western-style department stores, state monopolies, and foreign investors. And in this vacuum of trust, only one institution remains respected: the mosque. The Shah's regime, meanwhile, grows more distant. SAVAK cracks down harder. Torture chambers fill. Political parties are outlawed. Elections become farcical. Even leftist and liberal opposition groups are decapitated before they can mobilize. Only the clergy, ironically protected by the Shah's fear of communism, are left standing. Khomeini's influence seeps back into Iran through cassette tapes, secret booklets, and whispered sermons. His followers risk prison just to hear his voice. In the capital, Tehran, the skyline rises with oil wealth, skyscrapers, highways, universities, and nuclear deals with the West. give the illusion of success, but beneath the surface, pressure builds, and the cracks begin to show during what was supposed to be the celebration of Iran's triumph. In 1971, the Shah stages one of the most extravagant celebrations the world has ever seen. The 500th anniversary of the Persian monarchy, held in the ruins of Persepolis, the ancient capital of Cyrus the Great. It is a pharaonic display of wealth and power. Lavish tents, French chefs flown in peacock feathers, crystal goblets, royal guests from across the world. The Shah wears a cape of green velvet and gold. It is meant to showcase Iran as a modern, majestic empire reborn, but back home, the people are not invited, and they are watching. To the poor, it is obscene. To the pious, it is blasphemy. And to Khomeini, still in exile, it is proof that the Shah is drunk on vanity and headed for a fall. Meanwhile, Western nations continue to flood Iran with weapons and advisors. The United States sells fighter jets, rather systems, and even considers helping Iran develop nuclear power. In exchange, American oil companies enjoy privileged access to Iranian resources. To Washington, the Shah is a bulwark against Soviet expansion, a strong man in a dangerous neighborhood to Iranians. He is becoming more pharaoh than king, and the whispers of revolution are getting louder. By the mid-1970s, Tehran is a city of contradictions. In its north, fashionable women walk freely, dance at parties, speak French, and study abroad. In its south, workers sleep in mud brick slums, uneducated and jobless. The Shah dreams of turning Iran into the Japan of the Middle East, but the machinery of change is grinding down. Inflation spirals, corruption spreads, political dissent is brutally crushed, and still the mosques remain untouched. In Iraq, Khomeini becomes a ghost in the minds of Iranian herd, but not seen. His taped sermons circulate through underground networks. He preaches revolution, cloaked in religious rhetoric. He never speaks of the details of governance, only of justice, Islam, and the people. The ambiguity is deliberate. In 1977, after years of silence, the Shah's regime allows some mild political openness in an attempt to placate the rising opposition. It is too little and far too late. That same year, an inflammatory article appears in an Iranian newspaper attacking Khomeini's character. The cleric's followers erupt in protest. Blood is spilled in calm. According to Islamic tradition, the dead are commemorated every 40 days. Each mourning cycle becomes a new protest. Each protest yields more dead. And so it begins again, a cycle of grief, outrage, and resistance fueled not by communists or foreign agents, but by Iran's own devout. The streets swell, the slogans change, and for the first time in public, they say it out loud: death to the Shah. On the 8th of September, 1978, the regime crosses a line it can never uncross. Tens of thousands of protesters gather in Jala Square in Tehran. Ignoring martial law, they chant Khomeini's name. They raise fists. They demand the end of the monarchy. The military arrives. Then the shooting begins. By day's end, the square is soaked in blood. Dozenly dead, some say 64. Others claim over 1,000. It becomes known as Black Friday. From that moment on, the illusion of reform dies. There will be no negotiation. The Shah's support crumbles. Business owners go on strike. Oil workers join them. Tehran grinds to a halt. Then, on the 19th of August, disaster strikes again. This time, in the oil-rich city of Abadan, arsonists set fire to the Cinema Rex, killing over 400 people trapped inside. The opposition blames the Shah's secret police. The regime blames Islamic radicals. Evidence later suggests it was the latter, perhaps even under Khomeini's direction. But the damage is done. The people believe the Shah is behind it. And belief, not fact, drives revolutions. Demonstrations erupt across the country, synchronized like clockwork. Funeral, protest. Funeral, protest. The Shah watches his empire unravel. At first, he believes it will pass. Then, he begins to panic. By the end of 1978, Iran is no longer a monarchy in practice.
In April
even if it remains one on paper.
Just 2 months
exile
after
in
his return,
Najaf,
a
Khomeini is
national
pressured to leave
referendum is held.
Iraq's Ba'athist
The
regime
question is
under
stark.
Saddam Hussein
Do you want
no longer
an
wants
Islamic
him.
republic?
At first,
The
he
answer,
refuses to go to the West.
overwhelmingly,
Is unclean,
yes.
un-Islamic,
There is
and
no
far from the
other
faithful,
option on the ballot.
but finally,
Secularists
relents.
are stunned.
in October
Liberals are
1978,
Marxists
arrives in
are
Paris,
eliminated.
in the suburb of
Those who helped
Niafle-le-Château,
Khomeini rise,
from a modest villa,
students,
Khomeini begins one of
Azaris,
the most sophisticated media
intellectuals
campaigns in revolutionary
are
history.
thanked.
He gives interviews
then
daily but
silenced.
never reveals his true
The
intentions.
Islamic Republic
speaks
of
only
Iran
of justice,
is declared.
liberty,
Khomeini
and
is
ending
now
tyranny.
Rahbar,
Western
supreme
intellectuals
leader,
like Jean-Paul Sartre
and the clerics
Michel
who had
Foucault
long stood
praise
at the
him.
margins of
The
political
New York Times
power
calls him a
now
Gandhi-like
control
figure.
the army,
No
the
one reads the
courts,
book he wrote
the
in Najaf
media,
Hukumate
and the
Islami,
future.
the Islamic government,
Women
which
are
outlines
ordered
a
to wear the
theocracy
veil
ruled by
again.
clerics.
Alcohol
No one
is
asks him
banned.
about stoning,
Mixed dancing
amputations,
outlawed.
or
Secular
religious
judges
police.
purged.
The Shah
Thousands are
meanwhile,
arrested.
is still
Dozens
battling cancer,
executed.
despair,
And
and
still,
indecision.
many
He gives a
Iranians
final speech
cheer.
on national television.
They do not
His
see
hands
the
shake.
darkness to come.
His voice falters.
They see a new
I have
dawn.
heard the voice of your
A
revolution,
country finally
says,
free of foreign
but it is too
meddling,
late. The
imperial
military
shame,
waits for orders to crack
and
down.
corrupt elites.
No order comes.
But the
generals see
revolution's
the writing on the
appetite
wall.
does not
On the
stop
16th
at
of January,
Iran's borders.
1979,
Khomeini
the Shah
calls for
boards a
Islamic
plane
uprisings
and leaves Iran
across
for a
the
short
Muslim
vacation.
world.
It is the last
He
time he will
labels
ever see his
America
homeland.
the Great
Part 9,
Satan.
the return of
And
the
in
imam.
November
On the 1st of February,
1979, a group of radical students
a Boeing
storms the
747
U.S.
lands in Tehran.
Embassy in Tehran.
On board is Ayatollah
taking
Khomeini,
52
14 years in exile,
Americans hostage.
no army,
What began
no
as a
political party.
revolution
and yet he
becomes
returns like a
global
messiah.
crisis.
Millions flood the streets to
The
greet him.
United States
Volmavate.
breaks diplomatic
Men chant.
ties.
Boys carry
The
posters
West
of his
imposes
stern,
sanctions.
bearded face.
The Middle East
The peacock throne
plunges
is empty,
into uncertainty.
and the old empire is
And
dead.
Iran,
In just 10
once
days,
the darling of
the final
West,
institutions of the monarchy
becomes
crumble.
its most
The
feared
prime minister
enigma.
flees.
As Iran's
The army
revolution
refuses to fight.
tightens its grip,
Police remove their
the
uniforms.
Shah wanders the globe
Khomeini
in
appoints a
exile.
provisional Islamic government.
Egypt,
He visits the graves
Morocco,
of martyrs.
the Bahamas,
Then the city of Qom, where it all
Mexico,
began. The
America.
revolution is now complete.
No
But the
country
real transformation
wants him
is
for
only
long.
beginning.
He
Khomeini
is
wastes no
ill.
time. In April
Cancer devours his
1979,
body.
just
His
2 months
presence
after his
invites
return,
protest,
a national
instability,
referendum is held.
and diplomatic
The question
headaches.
is stark. Do you
In
want
July
an Islamic republic?
1980, he
The
dies
answer overwhelmingly
in Cairo
is yes.
at the age of 60.
There is no other option on the
He is
ballot.
buried with
Secularists
full
are
honors,
stunned.
mourned
Liberals
by
are
a
sidelined.
handful of loyal
Marxists are
monarchists,
eliminated.
and by no
Those who helped
country.
Khomeini rise students,
Just
Bazaars,
1 year later,
intellectuals
Khomeini's new
thanked,
republic is at
then
war.
silenced. The Islamic Republic of Iran is declared.
Saddam
Khomeini is
Hussein's
now
Iraq
Rabbar supreme
invades
leader.
Iran,
And the clerics
hoping
who
to
had long
crush
stood at the margins of political
revolution
power now
while
control
it is
the
still
army,
fragile.
the courts,
The
media,
Iran-Iraq war will
and the
last
future.
8 brutal
Women
years.
are ordered to wear the veil
Over
again.
1 million
Alcohol
dead.
is banned.
Chemical weapons.
Mixed dancing outlawed.
Child soldiers.
Secular judge
bombed
purged.
cities.
Thousands
And
are arrested.
still, the regime
Dawson's executed.
survives.
And still,
Khomeini
many Iranians
calls the
cheer.
war a divine
They do not
test.
see the darkness to come.
He compares
They
it
see a new
to
dawn,
the early trials
a country
of Islam.
finally free of foreign meddling,
And even as
imperial
Iranian
shame,
cities burn,
and corrupt elites.
he refuses
But the revolution's
peace.
appetite does not stop at Iran's borders.
War,
Khomeini
war
calls
until
for Islamic
victory,
uprisings across
he
the Muslim world.
proclaims.
He labels America the
By
Great
the
Satan.
time peace
And
finally
in November,
comes in 1988, Iran is exhausted.
979,
Khomeini is
a group
frail,
of radical students storms the
and yet
U.S.
the Islamic
Embassy in
Republic
Tehran,
remains.
taking 52 Americans
1
hostage.
year later, in
What
June
began as a revolution
1989,
becomes a
Khomeini
global
dies.
crisis. The
2
United States
million
breaks
people
diplomatic
attend his
ties.
funeral.
The West imposes
His
sanctions.
grave becomes a
The Middle
shrine.
East plunges into uncertainty.
But his
And
revolution
Iran,
never dies.
the darling of the West,
More
becomes
than
its most
4
feared
decades
enigma
have passed since
as
the
Iran's
fall
revolution
of the
tightens
Shah.
its grip. The Shah
And
wanders the
still,
globe in exile.
The echoes of
Egypt,
1979
Morocco,
are
the
everywhere.
Bahamas, Mexico,
In the theocracy
America,
of modern Iran.
no country wants him for long.
In the slogans
He is
shouted in
ill.
the streets of Tehran.
Cancer devours his body.
In the strained
His presence
relations
invites protest,
between East and
instability,
West.
and diplomatic
In the
headaches.
deep fissure between
In July
secular governance
1980,
and religious
he dies
authority.
in Cairo at the age of 60.
In the hijab.
He is buried with
And in
full
the
honors,
protests against
mourned
it.
by a handful of loyal monarchists,
In the Middle
by no
East's
country.
wars and
Just
alliances.
1 year later,
and
Khomeini's
in
new
the
republic
silent
is at war.
question that hangs in
In September
the air, unanswered.
1980,
What happens
Saddam
when
Hussein's
modernity
Iraq invades
arrives?
Iran, hoping to
Without
crush the
democracy,
revolution while it is still fragile.
The Shah
The
dreamed of a
Iran-Iraq war will
westernized
last
Iran,
8 brutal years.
rich,
Over 1 million dead.
industrial, powerful.
Chemical weapons, child
He
soldiers,
built highways.
bombed cities,
He bought jets.
and still,
he crushed
the
it.
regime survives.
Dissent.
Khomeini
But
calls
he
the war
never
a
saw
divine
the soul
test.
of his country
He compares
turning
it to the
against
early
him.
trials of Islam,
Khomeini,
and even as
meanwhile,
Iranian cities
offered
burn,
no roads,
he refuses peace.
no riches,
War,
no reforms,
war until victory.
only faith.
He proclaims,
And
by the
that,
time peace
it
finally
seems,
comes in
was
1988, Iran is
enough
exhausted.
to topple an
Khomeini
empire,
is frail.
enough
And yet,
to rewrite
the Islamic
history,
Republic remains.
enough
1
to
year
start
later,
a revolution
in June
that would
1989,
shape the world we live in today.
Khomeini dies.
Revolutions,
2 million people
history
attend his
teaches
funeral.
us,
His
do
grave
not
becomes a
begin
shrine.
when people have
But his
nothing.
revolution never dies.
They
More than
begin
4
when
decades have
people
passed since the
just
fall of the Shah.
enough to imagine
And still,
something more.
the echoes of
and are told they
1979
cannot have
are
it.
everywhere.
In Iran,
In the theocracy
the
of modern
people were
Iran,
promised modernity,
in the slogan shouted
but
in the
not
streets
liberty,
of Tehran, in the strained relations
reform,
between East and West,
but not voice,
in the deep fissure between secular governance
roads
and religious
and
authority,
satellites,
in the
but
hijab
not choice.
and in the protests against
The
it,
Shah believed
in the Middle
that
East wars and alliances,
westernization was salvation.
and in the silent question that hangs in the air,
Khomeini believed
unanswered.
that salvation
What
lay
happens
in
when modernity
purification
arrives without
of the
democracy?
soul,
The Shah
state,
dreamed of a westernized
society.
Iran-rik,
each
industrial,
man ruled
powerful.
with a certainty that
He built
brooked
highways.
no rivals.
He bought jets,
Each claimed to
crushed
speak
dissent,
for the people,
but he never saw
but
the
in
soul
the end,
of his country
one
turning
man
against
was
him.
forced to flee,
Khomeini,
and
meanwhile,
the other died.
offered no roads,
A ruler of
no
hearts
riches,
as well as
no
laws.
reforms.
Yet what did
only faith
Iran truly
in
gain?
that it
A
seems
monarchy traded
enough.
for a theocracy.
enough to topple an empire,
One form of
enough to
censorship
rewrite history,
replaced by
enough
another.
to start a revolution that will shape the world we live in
Opposition
today.
Not
Revolutions.
eliminated.
History teaches
Women
us
traded the
do not
miniskirt for the
begin
veil,
when people have nothing.
but not
They
for
begin
freedom.
when people have just enough to
Dissenters
imagine
still
something more
disappear.
and are told
And
they cannot
still,
have it.
the
In
revolution
Iran,
claims
the
it is
people were
not yet
promised
finished.
modernity, but not liberty.
Today, the
Reform,
Shah's portrait
but not
hangs
voice.
only in
Roads and
museums
satellites,
or
but not
exile
choice.
cafes.
The Shah believed that
His
westernization was
palaces
salvation.
stand empty,
Khomeini believed
visited
that salvation
by
lay in
school
purification of the
children
soul,
unaware of the
the
monarch
state,
who once ruled
and
them.
society. Each
His
man
name
ruled
is
with a certainty
remembered
that
not
brooked
for
no
what
rivals.
he built,
Each
but
claimed
for
to speak
how
for the
he
people.
fell.
But in the
And
end,
Khomeini,
one man was forced to flee,
his image is
and the
everywhere.
other died, a
On
ruler of hearts
currency,
as well as
on
laws.
murals,
Yet what
on
did Iran
billboards
truly
in
gain?
every
A
city.
monarchy traded for a
But his
theocracy,
successors
one
rule
form
in
of censorship
Iran
replaced
where
by
hope
another,
is rationed,
opposition
where
swapped,
youth chant
not
against
eliminated.
the very republic
Women
he
traded the
founded,
miniskirt for the veil,
and where
but not
women
for freedom.
now burn their
Dissenters
hijabs
still
in the
disappear,
same streets
and
where
still,
they once
the
cheered
revolution
his
claims
return.
it is not yet finished.
The
Today,
paradox endures.
the Shah's portrait
The
hangs
man
only
who
in museums
restored
or
pride
exile
to
cafes.
Iran
His
also
palaces stand
shackled
empty,
it.
visited by school
The
children
man who
unaware of the
promised
monarch who once ruled them.
independence
His name is
created
remembered not for what he built,
isolation.
but for how he
The
fell.
revolution that
And
promised the
Khomeini,
people a
his
voice
image is everywhere,
speaks for them
on currency,
without
on
asking.
murals, on billboards
In
in
the
every
end,
city.
what
But
toppled
his
the
successors
Shah
rule in
was
Iran,
not
where hope
tanks,
is rationed,
but time.
where youth chant against
Not
the very republic
assassinations,
he founded,
but
and where women now burn their
accumulated
hijabs in the same
grievances.
streets where they once cheered his
The
return.
crowd grew
The
too
paradox
loud,
endures.
the myths
The man who
too
restored pride to
thin,
Iran
the
also
rituals
shackled
too
it.
hollow.
The man who
And
promised
in
independence
stepped a man with
created
robes,
isolation.
not rifles.
The revolution that promised the people a
Khomeini
voice
proved that
speaks for
faith
them
could be a sword,
without asking.
but faith,
In the end,
like
what
power,
toppled the Shah was
dulls
not
with
tanks,
time.
but time,
Today, the Islamic
not
Republic
assassinations,
faces
but
new
accumulated
protests,
grievances.
new demands,
The crowd grew too loud,
and a new
the
generation
myths too thin,
that remembers
the rituals too hollow,
1979
and
not
in
as
stepped
glory,
a man with
but
robes,
as burden.
not rifles.
History,
Khomeini
it
proved that
seems,
faith could be a
is
sword,
cyclical in Iran.
but faith, like power,
Empires
dulls
fall,
with time.
revolutions
Today,
rise,
the Islamic Republic faces new
icons
protests,
fade,
new
people
demands,
remain.
and a new generation that
And
remembers
so the story of
1979 not as glory,
lingers,
but as burden.
not as
History,
a closed chapter,
it seems,
but a question
is
still
cyclical
echoing
in
across
Iran.
the deserts,
Empires fall,
cities, and
revolutions
mosques
rise,
of a nation older
icons
than
fade,
memory.
people remain,
Can a country
and so the story
reconcile
of
its past with its future
1979 lingers not as a
before one
closed chapter,
consumes the other?
but a question still echoing across
This
the
has
deserts,
been a Legacy Files original
and the mosques of a
documentary.
nation older than memory.
If you found this
Can a
journey
country
through
reconcile
Iran's
its past
revolution
with its future
compelling,
before one
consider
consumes the other?
subscribing to the
This
channel
has been a
for
Legacy
more
Files original
long-form
documentary.
explorations
If you
of
found
the
this
turning
journey through
points
Iran's
that
revolution
shaped our
compelling,
world.
I consider subscribing to
Share
the channel for
your
more
thoughts
long-form
below.
explorations
What
of the turning
lesson
points
does
that shaped our world.
1979
Share your
offer
thoughts
for the
below. What lesson
21st
does
century?
1979 offer for the 21st century?